Well, hello, everybody. My name is Pauline Haycock, and I am the celebrant at Rayner's Funeral Home. And just before we start, I'd like to ask that if you have a cell phone, would you please be so kind as to turn the ringer off for the duration of our time together here. And the family would really appreciate it if you would take a minute to sign the guest signing board back there. Make sure you do that today. They'd love to know that you were here. And on behalf of the family, I would like to extend a sincere thank you to all of you for attending today. So family, thank you for having me. It's been a privilege to be able to come and to get to know you, even though we've had to do it over the phone, and to get to know Peter. As we've gathered to say goodbye to Peter, I'm very sorry for your loss, especially at this time that limits your opportunity to be together with all of Peter's family and friends. But world events do not change the fact that he was a valued and loved part of your family, or that he played a role in his community and the surrounding area. A man named Wood Hutchinson said, "Everything from kings to cabbages needs a root in the soil somewhere." And Peter James Brown's roots were planted deep in the soil of the farm, whether in the UK or in Canada. He was a farmer at heart, and that's what he spent his life doing. And just like many of us here, Peter's roots were wrapped around family, friends, and community. And one of the things James told me about his dad was that Peter loved a smart conversation. And that stuck in my mind all week as I was thinking about the service, and I thought I had better work hard at sounding intelligent while I was standing up here. So I figured I couldn't go wrong with quoting the ancient Greek playwright Sophocles. Didn't that sound smart? One must wait until evening to see how splendid the day has been. Well, there's a lot of truth in those few words. Looking back on our lives can be bittersweet. Bitter for any regrets we may have, but sweet as we ponder the good times. And that is what today is about, reflecting over the years of Peter Brown. To hear about the life he has lived and the adventures and the struggles that he has had. And it was a privilege for me to hear from James and Delena about Peter's life and his accomplishments. And it left me wondering, where do I even begin? How would I sum up Peter's almost 67 years of living in just 30 to 45 minutes? His story is huge. Well, I decided to talk a bit about legacy. A legacy is what each of us will leave to our loved ones and to this world when we're gone. Well, what is a legacy? The definition of legacy? Well, the dictionary would define legacy as a gift or a bequest that is handed down from one person to another. It is something descendable that one comes into possession of that is transmitted, inherited, or received from a predecessor. But a man named Peter Stropel is credited with saying, respect of intelligent men and the love of children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, who leaves the world better than he found it, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best that he had. I think that was a great description. So we're going to hear the eulogy now. Nigel. To be right up on it.
As for all of us, this was a deep shock. I never expected to be reading Peter's eulogy, or at least not for 20 years or so. My name is Nigel Thorne, and I knew Peter for close on 26 years. He was my best friend for 25. My first memory of Peter was meeting him in May of 1994 at seeding time, when I came to view the Peace Country for the first time. The realtor introduced us, and as was usual for Peter, he was busy working on his tractor. The next year when I moved to Canada, we became firm friends. Peter was born March 31st, 1953 in Hitchin, England, to Robert and Joan Brown. It was the year of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, and every child born that year received a symbolic coronation mug. He often commented on the thoughtfulness of the Queen for giving him a baby gift. He was sure most newborns were not acknowledged in this way. He was, of course, being facetious. At the age of 1, the family moved to Bury Farm in Stotfold, where Peter worked on the farm along with his siblings. This is where Peter accumulated his vast knowledge of farming, including operating and repairing all kinds of equipment. Most of his knowledge was self-taught, which paved the way for his innovative designs to come to fruition. One such invention was his custom-made sprayer, which he proudly used here in Farmington. Throughout the years, Bury Farm gained a few more acres, and a new on-floor grain store was needed. This involved the magic words excavation and concreting, two things as yet unknown to Peter and his brother David. This small deviation from farming suddenly turned into an all-encompassing interest that remained with them both for the rest of their lives. Peter was only 18 and David 21 and a half when they decided to stop working for their father on the farm and go into partnership to start a new career in groundworks, demolition and plant hire. D&P Brown was born. Their first contract in 1972 was to construct a new entrance and driveway to a large house next door to the farm. This involved a new concrete slab being constructed over a culvert at the entrance out onto the road. The whole job went well, and crucially, they had their first customer. These works, which are still in use today, would always draw a cursory glance from David and Peter whenever he visited England, mainly to check if the concrete was still intact. In 1980, with their confidence and knowledge slowly growing, they progressed on to building houses, both for themselves and for sale. Peter was a skilled builder, and along with Deleenia, was currently in the early stages of building their dream home in Penticton. He wanted it to be built strong and energy efficient. He recently completed the required BC Homeowners Builders course, which gave him permission to build his own home. This was a bone of contention with him. Due to COVID, he couldn't write the test at the exam center. He was asked to complete an open book written exam and was given a week to return it to the exam center. The irony of it wasn't lost to him. In 1994, with his young family and a container of possessions, he immigrated to Canada. Peter purchased his first farm in the North Pine area of Fort St. John. 3 years later, as the need for expansion increased, he purchased George Strasky's farm, which overlooks us today. This was his home up until April of 2019, when he sold the farm. An emotional auction was held, and with Deleenia at his side, he moved to sunny Okanagan to start the next chapter of his life. Peter was a humble man and never bragged about things in his life. That being said, the one thing he took immense pride in were his 4 children. Nicola, born in 1975, Madeleine in 1977, James in 1983, and Autumn in 1991. He loved talking about each of them, their accomplishments, and the beautiful grandchildren he was so lucky to have in his life. Like any father, he was always concerned for their well-being. He hoped they balanced work and fun, but always hoped he had given them the time and guidance they needed to be successful and happy in their adult lives. He led by example, instilled a love for travel, and wanted them to always challenge themselves. One of the things I admired the most about Peter was that he was his own man. He was not concerned much about other people's opinions, about his style of working or his equipment. He would always just shrug his shoulders and say he was happy for other people with their stuff, but he knew what he had would get the job done. He did most everything himself, and he did it his way. Many times I've attended the Red Deer Farm Show with Peter, and he would normally book the motel. As most of you know, Peter was always hunting for a good bargain, and so I was never exactly sure what type of motel we would end up in. We certainly got to stay in some very interesting places. His reputation was one of his strongest qualities, and honesty was an attribute that mattered the most to him. He had an amazing ability to make something out of nothing, turn a bad situation into a good one, and make a lot with so little. Like many farmers, he had a strong work ethic and was very good at complaining about the weather. He had a great sense of humor and an easygoing mannerism that made him so easy to chat to. A comment has been made frequently about Peter since his passing, has been that he was a true gentleman, somewhat old-fashioned and very considerate. In 2013, he met Deleenia, the one, as he frequently referred to her by, and that November moved her to the Peace Country. They were subsequently married in July of 2014 on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. They operated the farm together, attended functions in the community, and shared lovely times with friends. In the off-season, they traveled to the United States in their RV for the winter. They loved spending time with their families and welcomed the joy their ever-growing brood of grandchildren brought to their lives. Peter touched many lives in many ways. Some grew up with him, others found friendships through farming or business. For some, it was just a random conversation where he offered advice, had a good laugh, or showed kindness through his words. Many people considered him their good friend. He cherished those friendships. Peter was a compassionate, hard-working, loyal, and honest man. He will be missed by all those who knew and loved him. Goodbye, my friend. You were taken too soon.
Thank you. Would you please come, Brandy? We have some messages from England.
Okay. These words are written by David. Tom, can you guys hear me back there? Okay. These words are written by David, Peter's brother. They are heartfelt memories from his sister Carole and Pauline. My brother Peter, like most siblings, it's hard to recollect the first memories of them. Peter was 2.5 years younger than me, but we always felt the same age. That was my impression. His may have been different, but I never asked him, and I can't now. One of the early memories I have was when we were about 11.5 and 9 years respectively, going on holiday in an old caravan owned by my grandfather at Walton on the Naz. This caravan was designed for a family of 4, and there was 6 of us in our family. Peter and I decided we would sleep in the Vauxhall Bedford van on the floor, typically used for delivery of fruit and veg on the farm. But on this occasion, Dad had driven down in the caravan, and Mom had driven down in the car. Maybe this is where he first found his taste for a motorhome, but I didn't. It was hell on wheels. Another memory was of the winter of 1962-63, a long cold spell with 18 inches of snow. Nothing compared to the winters he would face later in Farmington, Canada. However, with the snow covering all that was green and the only visible food was good old Brussels sprouts. So at first light, before we went off to school, we had to go to the Brussels field, approximately half a mile away, carrying a shotgun each and a pocket full of cartridges to blast away the flocks of pigeons who were descending onto said Brussels. Dad always said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes." As a 12.5 and 10-year-old, it seemed normal to us then, but maybe not so much nowadays. As we had some good farm tracks close by, it seemed a good idea that Peter and I should invest in some means of having some light entertainment. This came in the shape of a 1938 Austin 10, purchased for the pricely sum of 10 British pounds. This was a car that was destined for a scrapyard the moment we bought it. If we'd held on to it and looked after it, our investment would have been worth thousands now. The petrol we bought from the local garage to fuel this monster was only 35 pounds a gallon. By comparison, our school meals at the time were 30 pounds a week each. This meant Saturdays and Sundays during good old weather were spent going up and down the farm tracks, perfecting our cornering without rolling it off the track. It was around the age of 14 and a half and 12 years of age, where we weren't quite legally permitted to drive it on the roads. So in our view, we thought it'd be more legal to push the car on the road without the engine running. Unfortunately, this view was not shared by the Stopful village policeman as he cycled up alongside us to explain this. After some questioning, he issued a written warning to our parents, stating that they would seize the vehicle and send it to the scrapyard, whilst charging the expenses to our parents. Little did the policeman know this car was long distance for the scrapyard, and he would have been saving us a job. 12 years after working together and building our company, D&P Brown, Peter had itchy feet and decided to sell up and move to Cornwall to start a new life with a caravan campsite. Walton-on-the-Nez clearly had a lasting impression on him of what lengths people will go to in order to have a holiday in a tin can. I believe this is where Peter first had an idea of immigrating to Canada, which he went on to achieve. To this day, I still admire his bravery, fortitude, tenacity, and ambition to continue to pursue this dream, and know he was immensely happy being married to Delena, the memories created together, and excitement for their upcoming future. I will miss Peter dearly, and always enjoyed our chats on the phone and sharing updates on what was happening in both our lives. This one is from Peter's grandson, Lewis, in Australia. I can feel the joy of Peter's soul within me. Growing up, he was such a huge role model for me. I cannot even begin to put into words how much he has positively influenced me and our family. I'm hoping to have a celebration of his life down at the beach soon. I'd love his legacy to live on to as many people as possible, and strongly feel others would benefit from hearing his life story, as so many already have when I speak of him. He was an amazing man. This is from Madeleine and Nicola. Dear Dad, although our relationship with you wasn't always easy, especially when we were young, we always knew how much you loved us and how special we were to you. When you moved to Canada, it seemed like we were a world apart. But over time, we rebuilt our relationship with you, and you became very important in our lives. Coming to Canada to visit you when our children were younger was such an amazing experience. It inspired our children to travel the world and made us realize you weren't so far away. A few years later, we met you in America, where you got to fulfill your dream of taking your two girls to Disneyland. We have got so many happy memories from this trip. From going to 3 different hotels in Flagstaff, as you couldn't remember which one you had booked, only to find out you hadn't booked any, to cooking soup in a frying pan in the sand dunes of Death Valley. But what meant more to us is the time we spent together, just the 3 of us. Although we couldn't see you as much as we would have liked, you were always at the end of a phone when we needed you. You always had a story to tell us or a good bit of advice should we need it. We all looked forward to your trips to England. It caused so much excitement amongst your grandchildren when Granddad Peter was coming to visit. We would feel so special as we had our dad at home with us. More recently, when you brought Delena with you, it made our family complete as we could tell how happy you were together. You had so many plans for yours and Delena's future, and for all of us as a family. Life is so cruel to have taken you too soon. The hardest part of saying goodbye to you at the end of a visit was the tears you always had in your eyes when you left us. Well, the tears are in our eyes now, Dad. We love and miss you so much. You will forever be in our hearts. Sleep tight, Dad. Your loving daughters, Nicola and Madeleine. This one is from my husband, Mike, and myself. Dear Peter, we keep expecting you to walk through the back door and say, hello there. You were such a big part of our everyday lives and a big part of our future. I had lots of big plans for the yard at the new house for all your grandkids and your kids too. We still have lots of green tea in our cupboard that we bought just for you, and we don't drink it. Thank you for never making fun of my English accent, because you knew how much I love to say, Peter, would you like a spot of tea? And he always said yes. And I guess my secret stash of chocolate will stay more stocked without me having to share. Mike is going to miss his best floating partner. But those water socks you love so much will always remain a topic of conversation at our house. Mike will miss his tree chopping partner and the person he could go on odd jobs and adventures with. There are so many things we would like to thank you for, but the most important would be the support and love you had for our children. Your presence will be missed. Not sure who's going to discuss with them the economy and the importance of paying into CPP and eating your greens, but we'll try. We think Emmett, or Bruiser as you like to call him, will eat anything, but we needed your enthusiastic help talking about Brussels sprouts and Swiss chard with Gabby. I also need to thank you for coming into my mom's life when you did, for taking her on adventures and opening her up to a wonderful family, for supporting her wants and needs when it comes to the people she loves so much in her life, for loving her during this stage of her life. Gabriella says that she misses her papa, but she knows that you're with Randy and that you're happy because you went swoosh in the sky. You always said she was anything but average, and we agree, so we'll take a page from her book and believe you're in a great space. Mike says, cheers, mate. With lots of love, Mike, Brandy, Gabby, and Emmett.
Thank you. I always encourage families to take that opportunity to come and share. It's a hard job. It's a difficult job, but it's a wonderful opportunity to bring tribute to that person that you love and care about so much. So well done. James is going to share a poem with us.
Dad was not secretly a poetry lover, but he really enjoyed the movie 4 Weddings and a Funeral. So there's a poem from there that I wanted to share. It's called Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let airplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week, my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon. Dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good.
Thank you. Delena? This family worked very hard to be a part of today. I'm so proud of them.
For Peter, a question that Peter and I were asked frequently was, how did you two meet? And then I would proceed to tell them of my one and only experience with the dating site eHarmony. My daughter, Brandy, helped me with my profile, and then the rest was up to me. I was terrified. I kind of thought, this is like a stalker, stalking his prey, and I really didn't fancy the idea at all, you know. So I first went on eHarmony January 14th, 2013. Peter contacted me on January 14th, 2013. I would find out later that it was Peter's daughter Madeleine's birthday. He thought that was a good sign. He sent me an icebreaker. I took my computer up to my friend Bev's house and said, look at this. I showed her the pictures of the guys that had contacted me. They were in their best attire and very poised and somewhat staged pictures. One of Peter's profile pictures showed him standing near a riverbed in work boots with his laces untied. His hair was uncut and is sticking out everywhere, and he had a silly grin on his face. And I said to Bev, what do you think of this guy? And we laughed. And I said, well, if he's anything, he's confident. He later said he took one look at my profile and knew immediately that he had to save me from whatever was out there. I mean, after all, many of you will know he was a well-seasoned online dater. I believed we rescued each other. Needless to say, I never answered another message from anyone else. I was so thrilled to learn he had an English accent. He always answered my calls with, hello, my dear. To this day, those words and the way he said them melts my heart. Sometimes I thought he too must love the sound of his own voice because he really did love to chat. The one thing I always admired about him was he always gave you 100% of his attention in a conversation. It didn't matter if you were 8 or 84. What you had to say mattered. He worried about the financial state of the world. He was always telling our kids and nephews and even little grandchildren to keep working or to get a job so that they could keep contributing to the CPP because he was afraid it was going to run out of money. The thing that breaks my heart is that he worked so hard all his life to have his retirement, cut so short. It's not fair. He loved listening to the music of the 70s. He felt that was real music. He was always looking in the fridge for something to clear up. He was a true chocoholic. I've been picking up empty chocolate wrappers for years, everywhere, in every piece of equipment, every vehicle, behind the bed, in the bathroom. He loved world news and politics. He took the Canadian citizenship test very seriously by studying his rights, responsibilities, and knowledge of Canada. He was disappointed that the other new citizens weren't dressed respectfully for the ceremony. He made sure Autumn was dressed respectfully for the ceremony. That was Peter, always proper. I will be eternally grateful to Peter for sharing his world with me. I was terrified of flying, but with him by my side, I felt safe. I always felt safe with Peter. I will miss the future I was supposed to have with him. I will miss our morning coffee in bed as we talk about nothing and everything. Our daily crib games, driving down the highway and looking over at him and seeing that silly little grin, like he didn't have a care in the world. I will miss his grumpy comments about the youth of today, the price of food and gas, and Justin Trudeau. There is a song by the band Alabama that Autumn and I believe typifies how Peter lived his life. One line in particular sums him up perfectly. I'm in a hurry to get things done. That was Peter. Mostly, I will miss the feel of his hand in mine as we walk along the water planning our next project, our next vacation, our next something, because we always had a next, or we thought we did. I have so much more to say to you, Peter. I always thought we would have more time. Peter hated cliches, so I feel it appropriate to give him this one. It's better to have loved and lost than to never loved at all. Goodbye, my love. You have my heart. Good job.
And James.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Pauline. And on behalf of Peter's siblings, Carole, David, and Pauline, and children, Nicola, Madeleine, Autumn, and myself, thank you all for coming today to celebrate Peter's life. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Peter's son, James. For those of you who do know me, you know I'm just like my dad, so I had to have the last word here today. I can't possibly do justice to who my father was in just a few words or stories. Words fall pitifully short of being able to capture the true essence of who he was. But as my dad said thousands of times throughout my childhood, just as long as you're trying your best, he'll be happy. So here goes. My dad was a lot of things to a lot of people. A brother, a partner, a father, a friend. As my dad, he was also my first and greatest teacher, and he was just starting to teach me his latest lesson, how to raise a child in the face of so much change and challenge, just the best way that you can. Just try your best. And I was also learning to see him in a new light, as an equal, just one father to another. We had long discussions about how to encourage children to try their hardest without pushing them too hard. Discussions about the value of education. We remember times when I was a teenager, he would try to teach me the value of hard work. Together we scaled the roofs of under-construction sheds with a hammer and nails, while the wind blew and we struggled to screw down a sheet of roofing tin. He taught me the value of hard work, but he also taught me that the tenet of Dad's main religion was never use any safety equipment. Dad was always passionate about teaching us things whether I was ready or not. It was a gray, rainy day on slick grass in the field behind our house in England. I was only 9 years old, and Dad decided he wanted to teach me how to drive a car with a manual transmission. And over the years, as I continued to learn, he taught me how to only grind the gears once every 5 minutes or so. And then he taught me how to change a clutch. He excitedly taught me how, with just a hammer, a saw, some wood, and screws, you could build a bookshelf that would almost stand up by itself. But, and I quote, "You shouldn't treat it like a normal bookshelf, James." At the age of 40, just 3 years older than I am today, he taught me one of his greatest lessons, to be brave. Brave enough to uproot his family away from the English foundations he'd known his whole life, and plant roots in a new country, a new community, and a new circle of friends, you, who became his second family. He taught me to be self-reliant, but also to be kind. Kind enough to listen to others' problems, lend a helping hand, or say the right words of encouragement at the right time. So many people have reached out to me in the last few days to share stories just like this. I'm so happy to hear that I was far from his only student, and so happy to hear that his stories helped others as well. He especially always knew how to tell an off-topic story intended to support. I distinctly remember one time, in 2014, I asked for his help negotiating a job offer for a new job in the city. "I don't know much about working in an office," he said with a smile. "But one time I was working on a pig farm and then he launched into a story that he hoped would help me with my problem. And somehow it always worked. All through his days, Dad's life was instructive. As he stormed into retirement with the gentle grace of a 10-ton tractor getting stuck in the mud, he continued to teach me many things. Even in some of our last conversations, he wanted to learn more about the problems that he saw in society, and he sought to understand my perspective and have deep, meaningful conversations, never colored by preconceived notions that his was the only valid perspective. Dad always claimed he'd lived a charmed life, and it wasn't until I started writing this eulogy that I understood why. He had many friends, a beautiful family, and a life that challenged him to always do the best he could. What more can you ask for? As it turns out, one of my first memories of my dad is the same as my last memory of him. Just him and I, driving back from a construction site, taking a long drive home in the pouring rain, eating 1 or 2 or 3 chocolate bars, late at night on the pitch black on winding roads, going faster than we probably should. Whether we were listening to Queen's greatest hits on the A1 motorway from Evesham to Stotfold in 1988, or talking about world events in 2020, the beautiful consistency of those memories reminds me that he was right. It was a pretty charmed life indeed. Some of the stories I've told today may sound to you a little meandering, maybe too brief. Some of the stories I've told today may sound to you a little meandering, maybe too brief. They ended abruptly, suddenly. They're stories without the satisfying conclusion that they deserve. You may feel like there were 100 more stories just waiting to be shared. Please believe me when I say I know how you feel. As I joined Delena in the days after Dad's death, I came across some of his schoolwork from when he was a 13-year-old schoolboy in England. In those days, agriculture was still a required class in the curriculum. And whether you knew Dad from the good crops that he showed off or the bad crops he quickly drove past, the farmers in the audience today may take inspiration from his report card of 1966. That year, his grade for his agriculture class was a mere 61%, a D-, and the teacher's remarks were simple and short. Satisfactory, but he is capable of much better work. She was right. His greatest work was indeed yet to come, but he would not know it. I believe his final, better work was to act as an inspiration to all of us left behind. To teach, to be kind, to work hard, to sacrifice for our families, and to laugh and smile through all of it. And Dad, if you're listening right now, we're all trying our best. Thank you.
Well done, family. That was articulate. It was thoughtful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it is fall in the Peace Country, and how can you tell? Can you smell it? Yep. Can smell the earth, the high bush cranberries, the fragrance of fresh turned garden soil as root vegetables like potatoes, beets, and carrots are being harvested. Maybe you stop by Ermie's house And you could smell the pungent smell of vinegar and dill in the house as pickles are being made. Can you see it? Yes. The supper time sunsets, the yellow leaves and the golden grain fields, and wood smoke curling from farmhouses. Can you hear it? Yeah, the steady rustle of the leaves in the trees as the wind rattles them and the tents. And then it knocks the leaves to the ground. The honking of geese as they head south, and the rumble of combines waltzing back and forth across the fields. What a beautiful time of year to bring Peter Brown back to the Peace Country to say goodbye to his friends and neighbors. This time of year always reminds me of an old Paul Overstreet song from when I was a kid back in the 80s. It was called So in Love, not So in Love, S-O-W-I-N-G, Sowing Love. Paul sings about watching his dad prepare the garden for planting in the spring and listening to him talk about what harvest time would bring. And his dad would teach him life lessons while he was plowing the soil. And the chorus says, he was sowing love for the family. He was sowing love. He took a little extra time looking forward to a bountiful harvest. Like a good father does, he was sowing love. Family, friends, like all of us, Peter Brown wasn't perfect. He didn't always do everything right, but he was looking forward to a bountiful harvest as he sowed into his life, his family, and his relationships, the things that he felt were important in the best way he knew how. In the words of his son James and his wife Delena, he gave people a fair shake. He was an active listener. He brought joy into others' lives, encouraged young people, and loved his children. Above all, he was a gentleman. Weren't your lives better because you knew Peter Brown? Curtis.
Hi there. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Curtis. I'm Delena's son. And I'm going to sing one of Peter's songs today. And it's one of his favorites because it reminded him of Mom. When they first started dating, he had to work in the field all day long and hop in the truck afterwards and get into Quesnel every time he actually could make it. And he'd even leave the next day. It didn't matter. He just wanted a couple hours. And the lyrics in this song speak to that. So it's called Here With Me, and it's by the Killers. The wheels are turning. I remember when you were mine. Now just to reach you, baby, I stand in line. But there's another world we're living in tonight. And there's another heart that's fading in the light. Don't want your picture on my cell phone. I want you here with me. Don't want your memory in my head now. I want you here with me. Spend the summer just laying out in the sun. Time seems to move so slowly when you're taking it as it comes. Or maybe we were just too young. Your body was tan and your hair was long. Show me a smile and my cares were gone. And falling in love filled my soul with fright. You said, come on, babe, it'll be alright. Must have been a fool to the bitter end. I hold on to hope. Hold on to hope to have you back again. I bargain then I fight. There's another world we're living in tonight. Don't want your picture on my cell phone. I want you here with me. Don't want your memory in my head, no. I want you here with me. I want you here, oh, I want you here, here with me. We're gonna miss you, Peter.
Thank you, Curtis. Would you please pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Father, we thank you for Peter, and I ask that you would comfort his family in the days and weeks to come. Help them to walk through the path of grief. Help them to encourage each other. And we thank you for Peter Brown, for the example that he set, not only for his family, but for his friends, and for the life that he lived. We just ask that you would go with these folks through the rest of today. Help them to encourage each other. And we thank you for each one who came out to honor Peter. We just pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. James, can I finish with that poem? May I finish with that poem or not? Okay. I'd like to finish with the Farmer's Creed. You may know it, you may have heard it. If you haven't, I hope that you will think of Peter. I believe a man's greatest possession is his dignity, and that no calling bestows this more abundantly than farming. I believe hard work and honest sweat are the building blocks of a person's character. I believe that farming, despite its hardships and disappointments, is the most honest and honorable way a man can spend his days on this earth. I believe my children are learning values that will last a lifetime and can be learned in no other way. I believe farming provides education for life, and that no other occupation teaches so much about birth, growth, and maturity in such a variety of ways. I believe many of the best things in life are free. The splendor of a sunrise, the rapture of wide open spaces, the exhilarating sight of your land greening up each spring. I believe true happiness comes from watching your crops ripen in the field, your children grow tall in the sun, your whole family feel the pride that springs from their shared experience. I believe that by my toil, I am giving more to the world than I am taking from it, an honor that does not come to all men. I believe when a man grows old and sums up his days, he should be able to stand tall and feel pride in the life that he's lived. I believe in farming because it makes all this possible. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. know. Did we forget somebody? I'm sorry. I didn't know.
No problem. I was asked to say a few words about Peter. I feel privileged to be able to say a few things. I had the pleasure of knowing Peter Brown for 23 years on both a business and a personal level. My first encounter with Peter was from the days when I was manager at Parish and Heinbecker in the late 90s. It was a couple days before Christmas, and I was short a couple rail cars of barley. I was told from a local farmer that Peter Brown had barley for sale, so I called him up and explained my predicament. I offered him a fair price, and he agreed to help me out. As we finished filling the second rail car late Christmas Eve, joking and laughing, I realized what a special man he was. His business followed me to AgriSource. He became an important confidant for me in the early years. We had many strategy sessions in the old fertilizer shed while waiting for his truck to fill. He was never short of business advice or good ideas throughout the years. Peter was a genuine person who had the ability to draw you in. His positive, calm energy was contagious. When you started a conversation with him, you didn't want it to end. His calming influence would set people at ease whenever they were near him. I will miss his smile and contagious chuckle. If I could use 3 words to describe Peter, they'd be honesty, integrity, and compassionate. Chris and I felt the privilege to had called him our friend. Till we meet again, our friend.